This is the online version of the Southern Weekly. Journalists in the paper in Guangdong province walked out after a row over censorship. They were angry after a nation government official rewrote an editorial which had called for political reform. They only agreed to go back to work after the government said it would no longer censor articles. Well, Keith Richburg is US newspaper Washington Post bureau chief in Beijing, and Keith joins me now live from Beijing. This revolt over Chinese censorship seems to be spreading, Keith.
It does indeed. It's spread today to Beijing, where the Beijing News, which is another previously reform-minded paper that recently was taken over by the government, had a bit of an internal newsroom row over the question of reprinting an editorial, sort of a government-sponsored editorial that had appeared in one of the nationalist newspapers. All newspapers were ordered to reprint this editorial saying that basically we must have censorship in China. And this newspaper, Beijing News, refused to print it for a long time. We're hearing now that its publisher resigned in protest over that. The staff was in tears. The editorial did appear, but it did not appear in a very prominent position. And and it's continued today, these protests on these micro-blogging sites called Weibo here. This is Chinese version of Twitter, where business people, actors, bloggers, activists have been finding creative ways around the censorship here to talk about this issue and to say that this question of censorship is not going to go away anytime soon.
It does seem, Keith, that this is an example of rather heavy-handed government censorship. Do you detect an increasing public anger about censorship? It's not a story that comes to the West very strongly.
Absolutely. This censorship has been going on since there's been the People's Republic of China. But this is what's new in this case is that journalists, publishers, people involved in the business tell me that this specific New Year's Day incident, as it's being called here, was more intrusive than ever before. This was a case where the editors had signed off on what was really a pretty innocuous New Year's Day message to readers, basically saying we want constitutional government in China. That was their dream. And it was rewritten after the editors had gone home, after the top editors were already away and signed off. It was rewritten by, we believe, someone from the Guangdong provincial propaganda department, basically turning it into a kind of an ode to the Communist Party. So that's what really got people fired up here, this very intrusiveness. But, as one newspaper publisher, a magazine publisher told me recently, this was really the straw that broke the camel's back. China is a big, sophisticated place, the world's second largest economy, and people are just fed up with being treated like children and told what they can read and what they can't read.
Well, can you show us the article? Because, we are told a deal has in fact been made.
A deal has in fact been made. This is the newspaper right here, Southern Weekly. We weren't even sure whether this paper was going to be coming out today. It's a weekly. This is their normal day to come out. The journalists at this paper were supposedly on strike or involved in some negotiations with the government as to whether they would even come out and print this paper. The deal was apparently negotiated by the local authorities there with the journalists that this paper did come out today. Here's a typical story about an orphanage fire on the front. But if you look inside of it, buried back on page 30 or page 32 is a small notice, you might even miss it, saying basically that while we understand censorship has to continue in China, censorship must keep pace with the times. It seems to be kind of a coded message saying, look, guys, we understand that we're living in a one-party state, you're going to censor the news, but let's modernize it, let's not be so intrusive, let's not be so heavy-handed. And that's really kind of the message that a lot of the protesters are saying. They understand that we're not going to go completely to a free system here, but they really don't want to be treated like children. They want to be able to read things openly. Right now, obviously foreign news sites are blocked, and even the news that they are able to read here is just heavily controlled. And people are here saying, look, we're a little bit smarter than that now. We're a little more sophisticated than that now. Let us read and make decisions for ourselves. So it's interesting to see whether this is going to continue and spread and what challenge this is going to present to the new leadership.
It does. A fascinating story. We'll follow that closely. Keith, thank you very much for joining us.